So if you're reading it and you're like, I don't know what this is, don't just pass over it. You need to actually like go and look up some MDN docs or whatever package you're using, those docs, and see, okay, what's actually happening here? Because that's where the learning happens.
You actually remind me of something too. Hold on. I want to go because I already thought of this before and I don't want to
Hey
forget it.
guys, don't
Yeah,
fight, don't
this
fight.
is something I thought of actually a while ago. I didn't want to forget for today, and I'm glad I remembered. I think one of the things you can get from just writing out this code and doing like what you said is a really good idea. I used to do that too. Even using
Yeah,
like AI if you need to help explain it.
yeah.
But learning to see the connections, like why are things being done?
Mm-hmm.
What is the response? What's the request? Why do these things connect this way? Because when you start to see that higher picture, the
Yes,
syntax you can always look up. There is
yes,
always going to be a place you can look up what's the right syntax in the right language for this thing. There's documentation, there's all kinds of resources. If you understand how things connect together, you can figure out how to do it.
yeah.
And learning that, like how those things talk and connect, is like crucial. So I think that is a really good one. Sorry, go ahead, Randall.
Well, that touches on what I was going to mention too, is that not being too focused on the wrong goals. So like a lot of times, especially when I was in
Mm.
I'm
tutorial
getting it
help,
done.
I thought
Yeah.
that getting done the tutorial was the important part. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'd like gloss over going through documentation or going on
Yeah.
some tangent that was necessary for this so I could learn something. And I missed out on a whole bunch of stuff because I thought the faster I finished the tutorial, the faster I'd get to that end goal that would be the job and the money and all of that stuff. But
It
really,
also
it's like
feels good, right? I mean, it makes sense because you're like, okay, I did this I can put now I say I did this, even though like really did you? It's like
yeah,
Yeah.
but the tutorial is just part of the learning process, and the learning process requires you to go through these different avenues to actually learn the stuff. Like you're not, even though you can learn a little bit from just following along, by actually taking the time to go through the documentation to learn the stuff as you're doing it. Because that's another thing where like we oftentimes think that we can just like put it off till later. Like these things that are new topics for us as we're going through something, we're like, oh, I'll just put it off till later. I'll put it off till later. And it's like,
Yeah.
but it's appropriate right now. So maybe you should just do it right now while it's appropriate because later is never going to get done.
you know what it
Yeah.
reminds me of too, and I think the analogy works really well. It's like if you're in school or something and you get assigned a reading assignment and you have your textbook and you're reading and you don't look up any words you don't understand, you just skip over, you just
Yeah.
skip over concepts you don't understand. At the end of the day, how much are you really getting out of it, right? You're not learning. Learning is
Yeah.
looking up those words, understanding why these things connect. That's the whole point, and that's what you should be doing with these. Yeah.
Jeez, you want to know what's crazy is so like before using a Kindle, I used to just guess what most of the words meant. Like
Now you
if
can
I
just
didn't know,
highlight
I would
them.
look at, yeah, now you just tap on it and have the meaning. And I'm like, man, this is so helpful.
Oh, really? I had two dictionaries that I always carried
Yeah, I
around.
never did that. I would just
Oh,
assume based on context what
I
Dude,
the
you're
word
such
usually,
a
meant. And
fucking nerd, dude.
but usually that
I
works.
know,
What?
He's
right?
like carrying around two
I
dictionaries
like,
everywhere he
I don't
goes.
know. I like words. I like
Well,
etymology.
you can't trust the old English dictionary. You
No,
need
you
the
gotta
new
have
English
two.
dictionary too.
But no, I think,
Everywhere I went, I had two dictionaries, a Bible, a Torah,
yeah,
Quran,
all
I
this
just in
don't
stuff.
think you're
case, you
A
using
know?
big
that word
code.
correctly. Let's look it up.
I don't know. I like no, but context you can learn a lot. But I think yeah, looking up is helpful. It's good. It's
Yeah.
good to know
Yeah.
what you're doing and what you're looking at. That's the whole
Well,
part of the process.
it's really cool to be able to look up. That's what my point of the Kindle
Yeah, yeah. It
thing
does make
was.
it
It's
easier.
actually really cool to be able to look up the words and be like, "Oh, that's what it means."
Yeah.
Which you can do so easily now that that's the point. Like it's so easy to look stuff up now. Like there's no reason.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that's funny. And I did the same thing, rush through tutorials just to get them done. And looking back, it's like
Yeah.
such a waste of time because
It
it's
is. Yeah.
so easy to look stuff up. There's
It's
AI,
so I
there's
think there's
documentation, everything's a click away. Half the time they give you the
yeah.
goddamn link. Like
Yeah,
it's
I think one of the reasons why is that as a junior developer, you're really in this rush to like add as many things to your portfolio as possible. And I think that's a common misconception because really it doesn't matter how many things you've built. What really matters more is like how quality of a thing you built. Because if you built
yeah.
one really cool package or a really cool app, that shows off a lot more than
Even a
like a
cool
bunch of
feature that you
smaller
added on
apps.
to something, it's
Yeah.
still cooler than, a bunch of stuff that a bunch of small apps you built from tutorials. Like something
Yeah.
unique, new to you that works well.
Yeah, totally. I had something else that I wanted to mention that I thought of before when going through tutorial hell and sort of that idea of like seeing the broader picture that you were talking about. So one of the things that I struggled with when I first started coding was you'd watch these coding tutorials and you're just like, where are these people getting this from, right?
Yeah.
And at some point it almost felt like magic. I'm like, how do they know to use like this thing, right? Or whatever it is. You see this a lot in JavaScript, especially when you're using like npm, because if you have packages installed, people are pulling things from packages and you're like, where does this come from?
It
And
seems
one of
like
the
magic, yeah, because if you don't know
yeah,
the package too, you got to find the documentation, all
yeah.
this.
And I've seen this actually in some of our students as well. It's a common thing. And one of the things that I think helped me a lot to understand some of this is whenever you see code, whatever it is, like it really comes down to the very basic principles of there's variables, right? And then there's like functions that you can do with those variables. I mean, ultimately everything else is like style, right? Like there's very few other things. So one of the things that helped me was understanding that no matter what somebody is typing on the screen, it's coming from somewhere, right? It's either built into the language itself, like it's a JavaScript method, or
Yeah.
it's being imported from some other
It's
file,
some other
right?
method they're importing from
Yeah,
somewhere
it's
else that
some
somebody else
other
made. Yeah.
package. And I saw sort of Bryce do some of this too, and other people inside the group. I saw Bryce do it recently. That's why I'm calling him out on it. But like you have to see when you're looking at code, where is this certain thing coming from, right? So like Bryce had an issue where he was trying to import something, but the path was wrong. And that's a very common issue because you're trying to, get some piece of code and bring it into another file, but the path isn't right. And so that's something that I saw frequently when I was like, where are they getting this from? And it's a little bit more confusing when it's a built-in method because then there's not a direct import, right? It's just assumed it's like built into the language itself. And so I think that can be sometimes some of the most confusing code
But
because
you
you're like,
have,
where are they pulling this like math.random from or something like that? And you're like, there's no math package that I'm importing, but it's built in,
but
right?
that's when you go to MDN, right? Where they have every single
Exactly.
one of those listed and you can search it. And then if it's not there, you know it's pulled in from somewhere else. It's either one they custom wrote or it's being pulled in from a package or something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And this came up last week too when we were doing the coding project that you're leading inside our Tuesday call is like part of being a developer is having curiosity, right? We all love tech. We all love code. We nerd out on this stuff. And that's why we're here, right? That's why we're not doing something else because we love this stuff. And so when you see something that you don't understand, allow yourself to have curiosity. Like
Yeah.
we were going through setting up a next project and we were going through the fonts and you had added a custom font and there was something that I think it was like display swap and it was just some, you know, basically like option that you're setting for the font. And I was like, huh, I wonder what that means. So I looked it up and I learned something, right? And
Yeah.
I'll remember that forever because I had that curiosity of like, I wonder what that means. And then I actually did the work of looking it up instead of just being like, it probably means something. Like I could have just sat there and let it pass, like it probably has some meaning, but I'm just following his code and typing it,
But
right?
you hit on a good point, right? Which is people forget that we're active learners. We're not passive learners.
Yeah.
If you just are passive, you'll take in some information, but probably like a
Hmm.
small percentage. But anytime you run into a problem that you solve yourself where you actively take action, you like
Yeah.
never forget it. Because
Yeah.
that's something like because you have a clear connection between two things, the problem and the solution. And it
Yeah.
just stays in your brain instead of somebody just saying, this is how you do it.
Yep.
And you just trying to, remember that and memorize it.
Yeah, totally. Um,
Good
so
morning, Chris.
yeah, good morning, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Let us know if you're watching, if you've been stuck in tutorial hell and how you've gotten yourself out of it or what that's felt like to you.
Mhm.
Because I think we've all been there before. I think it's a very common thing for new developers to feel this sort of tutorial hell. Go
I
ahead,
wanted to add
Daniel.
something else too. I think about those like big ideas and understanding like how this, because if you understand how tech works, the code
Hmm.
is only going to facilitate that, right? And it can
Yeah.
only do that. So if you understand how APIs work, if you understand how the internet works, it helps you figure out a bunch of stuff. So I know a really good practice too that I used to do and still do actually is if I run into something I'm not sure about, is either find a book that covers it or like a YouTube video if you don't like reading, right? Somebody that's just not doing code, just explaining the concept really
Yeah.
in depth. Like how do APIs work? What is client side, server side? What's the difference? what does, because there's so many terms thrown around too in tech. And if you
Yeah.
don't really understand them, they often are referring to, different interactions and links between things. It helps you sort of start to understand the larger picture and see, okay, that's how I'm going to get there from point A to B, right? And make
Yeah.
that actually work.